And today we're just going to be looking at audits, actions, and complaints and compliments. I'm just going to mute everybody just because I'm getting some feedback. So if you want to ask anything, just feel free to unmute yourself. Give me 1 second. Okay. So if we just come into audits on my training system and into audit planning, just a quick recap from last time. In here, you'll be able to see an overview of any audits that you've scheduled to complete on the system. And you've got your different filters here at the top. So you've got your overdue filter. So whenever you schedule an audit, you'll set yourself a deadline that the audit has to be completed by. And if that deadline is passed and the audit hasn't been completed, it'll appear in the overdue filter, which is here. You've also got your not started filter, your in progress filter, and your completed filter. And you can use the apply filter button below the relevant area if you want to view that set of audits. So if I click apply filter on not started, I only then get my not started audits on the screen below. On the left-hand side, you've also got your status tick boxes as well. So they do the same things as the apply filter buttons at the top. So by default, that will be on all. But again, I could untick all, tick not started, and in the same way, I would only get my not started audits on the right-hand side. And then just below your status filter, you've also got your open and closed filters that you can use to view your audits as well. And an audit must be open in order for you to be able to complete it on the system. And when an audit is open and closed is determined by the schedule you set up against the audit. So what I'll do now is I'll just jump into your system and I'll just show you where you can set up schedules against your audits. So if you just come into the admin area at the top, within your audit section, we have manage audits. And manage audits is where you'll just be able to see the list of current audits that are in your system. So at the moment, you've got 38 audits within your system. So you can either use these audits as they are, you can make amendments to them if you want to make any changes, and you can also configure your own audits from scratch with the add audit button at the top just here. So that'll be something that I'll take you through on the next session. So on that next session, we'll go through audit configuration and how you can change all of these if you want to. But if you want to set up a schedule against an audit, click onto the audit. So I'm just going to go into accidents and incidents. In the top right hand corner, you've then got your schedule button. And in this drop down, you just need to confirm the home that you want to set the schedule up against. So for yourselves, it'll just be Applecross Nursing Home for all. And if you then click assign, it'll take you into the scheduling area. And what we usually do for training purposes is we usually set a few audits up with an ad hoc schedule just by ticking this ad hoc when required box. And ad hoc basically means that you can come in and you can complete the audit whenever you like, as many times as you like. So we do this during training so that if somebody wants to come in after today's session and have a practice at completing an audit on the system, there's some ready and waiting for them and they don't have to wait for the schedule to open. Once we then get to the next session, I can take off the ad hoc schedule and we can go through setting up your proper audit schedules. So you may decide, for example, that you want to do accidents and incidents once a month. But just for today, I'll tick ad hoc when required. If I then press save, if I now come back to your audit planning area, you've got accidents and incidents in here. So that'll just sit there until the next session. So if somebody does want to come in and have a practice at completing an audit after today, they've got one to have a go at. We usually set up ad hoc on a couple of audits. So I don't know from the list anybody can spot any that they want to have a go at, just sort of have a bit of a play around on. And we can set those ad hoc schedules up against those as well. Has anybody got any that they can see on there that they want to just have a go at?
End of life.
Yep, so we'll do the same on that one. And if we just do one more.
Care planning.
Yeah, we can do the care plan one as well.
Can we also do wounds?
Yeah, which one was that?
The wound compliance plan. Got that?
Wound. I don't know if there is one for that specifically. Was that name? Did you see it on the list?
No, I'm just going through it again.
Infection prevention.
Pressure care. It would be pressure care.
Oh, pressure care. Yeah. So we'll do the same on that one. There we go. So if I now come back into your audit planning area, we've now got 4 ad hocs in here. So as I say, if anybody wants to come in after the session and just have a go at completing an audit on the system, they've got 4 here that they can practice on. And then when we get to the next session and we go through audit configuration, we can take off the ad hoc schedules and we can go through getting the proper sort of schedule set up against those. But you've just got 4 there that you can practice on. So if I now just jump back into my training system, what we'll do now is we'll go through how to actually complete an audit on the system. So I've got my open box ticked, so I can only see those audits that are available for me to complete on the system. And I'm going to choose the care plan audit just here. And I just need to click the manage audit button in order to open that audit. And when you click the manage audit button, you'll have the option of creating a brand new audit with the create new button at the bottom. Or if you want to carry on with an existing audit instance that you've created, it's just a case of clicking onto that instance within the table just here. But what we'll do is we'll just create a brand new one today. It then takes you inside the audit. And at the top here, you've got your audit progress tracker. And the idea of the tracker is that as you answer the questions on the audit, this questions bar will just start to populate with the colours that you can see above, depending on how you answer the questions. And the idea of the tracker is so that somebody can come into the audit, they can look at the tracker and they can get an idea of how you're performing without having to scroll through all the individual questions within the audit. Below that, you've got who is actually completing the audit. So if you're going to be completing it yourself, just tick that box and it will autofill that box to your name. If, however, it's going to be somebody different, open up the drop down, it'll give you a list of users that have been set up on the system, and it's just a case of selecting the relevant person's name from the list. We'll say that it's going to be myself. And then because this is a client care plan audit that's done per service user, before I can actually answer the audit questions, I have to just select who the service user is that I'm answering the questions about. And this is where any service users that you've added into your service user area will pull through to. So if I just scroll down, I'm going to say that I'm doing this audit about Stephen Adams today. So if I select his name and click use this service user, I then get my audit questions. And that element of the audit is configurable. So when you're setting your audits up, you can decide whether you want to make the audit specific to an individual service user or employee, or if you want it to just be a general audit for everybody, you can just leave that area blank. But that is something that you can configure and decide yourselves when you are sort of setting your audits up. So we've now got our questions, and the idea is you just need to read the question and select your response over on the right hand side just here. And as you select your response, the system will let you know whether it's the compliant or non-compliant response by turning to green or red. You also do need to make sure that you answer all mandatory questions as well. So that's just anything with a red asterisk next to it. And again, that is something that you can configure when you're setting the audits up. So if there are any questions that don't necessarily always need to be answered, you can take the mandatory flag off those questions. But for our first question, it's just around whether there is evidence of a thorough pre-assessment for new clients. And I'm going to say yes to that question. And we can see that that's the compliant response, as that has turned to green. Below every question, you will have an optional comments box. And this is where you can evidence your response. So it is optional, you don't have to do this, but I'd always recommend that you do, so that if the regulator turns up and asks you the same question, you can come into your audits and you can find your evidence for it just here. As you select your responses to the questions, the system will save those responses for you automatically, but where you are adding in a comment, you just need to ensure you click the Save Comment button underneath that. So if I just add a comment in of there is evidence of a thorough pre-assessment, I have to click Save Comment in order for that to save for me in the top right-hand corner. You also have a paper icon in the top right-hand corner of each question as well. That paper icon will just take you to your document management area. So if there are files that you want to attach as additional evidence, just browse for those files. You can attach more than one. There's no limit on the number of files that you can attach to a question. Once you've browsed for those, click the Save button, and it'll then change that icon to this icon on the left. So green with a green tick, just to indicate that you have got a file attached to that question. And if I just scroll down, certain questions do have sub-questions set up against them as well. Again, that is something that you can configure when you're setting your audits up. But at the moment, we've just got a sub-question of capture details of who was involved in the care assessment. This time it's just a text box for me to type my answer into. So I'm just going to add in my name and click Save. And that is question 1 complete. If I then scroll down to question 2, question 2 is just around whether risk assessments and care plans have been updated monthly or following significant change. And this time I'm going to say no. And we can see that that's the non-compliant response, as that has changed to red. And whenever you give the non-compliant response, you'll get this message below the question saying that action must be taken immediately. And after you've answered all of the questions in step 1, you'll move to step 2, which is the action section. And any non-compliant responses that you gave in step 1 will be listed in step 2. And the system will basically prompt you to create an action off the back of those non-compliant responses. So that message there is just letting us know that when we move to the next step, we're going to be prompted to create an action off the back of answering no. In the same way, we've got our optional comments box, but if you are given the non-compliant response, you would probably use this to add in more of your kind of reasoning rather than your evidence. So for something like this, you may say risk assessments and care plans have only been updated following significant changes due to staff shortages in the business, for example. Again, I just need to ensure I click the Save Comment button. And again, if I had any files that I wanted to attach as additional sort of proof of that, I can just browse and save those in the same way. And that is question 2 complete. So if I just scroll down, you can see that the format of the rest of the questions is the same. So it would just be a case of going through and answering these in the same way. Some questions do have a not applicable response on the end as well. Again, that is something that you can configure as part of the audit setup. So if you do want a not applicable response as well as yes or no, you can add that on. And if I just scroll through, you can get an idea of the types of questions that are on this audit at the moment. And as I say, these are just your kind of templated audits. So if you do spot questions that aren't applicable to the processes that you follow, you can remove them. You can edit the wording of the questions as well. So if some of the time periods, for example, don't align, you can amend those. And you can also add additional questions in as well. So we may not have covered everything that you audit across the care plan area, for example. So you can add questions in as well. So there's 23 questions within this audit at the moment. So once you'd been through and you'd answered all 23 questions, you would move to step 2 at the bottom just here. And when we move to step 2, we can see at the top it says the below may require an action. Please review these and create an action or state why an action is not required. So straight away in here we can see that question 2 is listed. And we're being prompted to create an action off the back of that with this create action button. But you'll also see that just below that, we've got a message that says, if action is not being taken, please click here to state why. So if on this particular occasion, you don't feel that you need to create an action off the back of the non-compliant response, you can click on that message, and it's then just a case of adding in a comment to say why an action is not required. So it could be for various different reasons. It may be that there is an action already in the system that encompasses your non-compliant response. So you may not want to kind of duplicate that action, for example. So whatever the reason is, add that reason into the comments box, click on the save button. It'll then get rid of that create action button for you, and it'll replace that with the reason that you've added into that comments box. If, however, you want to create an action off the back of your non-compliant response, we can click create action. It takes us into the action form, and it's just a case of going through and filling in the different fields of information that we've got on this form. So if we just set up an example action, I always set an action up to say, create a plan to update care plans regularly off the back of that particular response. So that's just going to be the action title. Below that, you've got the short description area. So the short description area is where you just need to provide a bit more detail about what needs to be done on the action. And as I said last time, whenever you add an action onto the system, you assign it to an action owner. And the action owner is the person who's going to be responsible for completing the action on the system. So I always say that the short description area should give the action owner all of the information that they need in order to complete the action successfully. I'm just going to add the same thing into here because it's an example, but there's no character limit in here, so you can add as much detail into the short description area as you need to. Below that, you've got your lessons learned and tips area. So these aren't mandatory fields. You don't have to fill them in if you don't want to, but if you do like to keep track of these as a business, after the action has been completed, you can come in and you can add any lessons that have been learned off the back of the action in this first area. And if there are any tips that you want to know off the back of the action as well, you can also type them into the text box. And then below that, we've just got some information that we need to select from these drop downs. So every action just needs assigning a priority level. And in here, you've got the option of high, medium and low. I'm going to say that this one is medium priority. You then just need to set a deadline date. So this is how long the action owner is going to have to complete the action. So if you just come to your calendar icon, if it was something quick, you might want to give them a day or two. Mine's related to creating a plan, so I'm going to give my action owner a week. You then just need to assign a category to the action. So this is our pre-configured list of categories, but as part of your system configuration, you can decide which categories you want to set up on the system. So you might just want to make this list a bit more refined so they reflect the categories that you want to use. I'll show you where to do that on the next session, but for now I'm just going to attach the care file category to this action. And then at the bottom we've got action owner and responsible employee. As I just said, the action owner is going to be the person that is responsible for completing the action. And if you open up the drop down, you'll just get a list of users that you've set up on the system. Your name will be included on the list as well. So if it is an action that you're going to be responsible for completing, you can just select your own name from the drop down. I'm just going to say that Debbie is my action owner. And once the action is added onto the system, the action owner will receive an email notification letting them know that they've been assigned an action to complete. On that email, there'll be a link. They click on the link, it'll take them into the action within the system and they can see what they've been assigned to do. On the right hand side, we've got responsible employee, and we refer to the responsible employee as the validator. So it's basically going to be the person that is responsible for checking off that the action has been completed correctly. So typically I'd say the responsible employee should be the action owner's manager, but the action owner and the responsible employee can be the same person if needs be. So if, for example, you had the registered manager as the action owner, you may be happy for the registered manager to validate their own actions. So in that instance, you could set them to be the same person. But I'd say generally for best practice, the responsible employee should be somebody senior to the action owner. In the same way, you'll get your list of users that have been set up on the system. And I'm going to say that Callum is my responsible employee as he is Debbie's manager. And then at the bottom, we've got action status. So if it's an action that you're setting up on the system for the first time, you can just leave the status as in progress. If I open up the drop down, you can see you've got a few other options in here. So if there's ever a delay with the action, you can come in and amend the status to on hold. And once the action owner has completed the action, they would come in and amend the status to completed. We'll just leave it as in progress for now. And if we click add action, it then gets rid of that create action button and it replaces that with the action that we've added onto the system. And this just acts as a bit of an audit trail. It's just so you can see which action has been created off the back of this particular non-compliant response. If you were to come into this audit in 5 years' time, come to step 2, you'd have this trail so you can see which action was created. And you've got a view edit button as well. So if you want to open up the action just to have a look at what's going on with it, you can use that icon as well. Over on the right hand side, just here, next to the action feed, you have got an additional add action button as well. So if there are any sort of more general actions that you want to create in relation to the audit, you can just click that add action button. It'll take you into the same action form, and it would just be a case of going through and filling out the fields of information in exactly the same way. So you don't just have to create actions off the back of your non-compliant responses. It could be a case that you go through step 1, you're compliant across every question, but you may still think of an action that you want to create in relation to the audit. So that's just where you can use the add action button on the right hand side. Once you've been through and you've set up all of the actions that you need to, you can move to step 3, which is the summary area. In here, you'll be able to see your previous audit rating, if applicable, at the top. And you can also add in some overall comments. Again, just make sure you click the Save Comment button if you are adding those in. You've then got your activity timeline just below that. So again, just a bit of an audit trail so you can see who's been doing what across the audit. And then at the bottom here, it will then ask you to rate the audit. And there are 2 different methods for rating an audit on the system. This is the first, where the person completing the audit just opens up the drop down and they select the rating that they think they should be given themselves. So based on how they answered the questions, they would just make a judgment on whether they should be given outstanding good, requires improvement, or inadequate. The second method involves standardizing the scoring in the back end of the system. And if you want to use that method, you basically go through each audit question, you assign a score to each audit response. And once you've done that, you then configure an audit scoring table at the top to say that in order to achieve an outstanding rating, you need to score so many points. In order to achieve good, for example, you need to score so many points, and so on. And I'd probably recommend that you use that second method, particularly if there's going to be multiple people completing audits on the system. This method is obviously very subjective. It's down to somebody's opinion. And I'd say it's fine if you've just got one person that's completing audits on the system, because it'll still probably be quite sort of standard across all of the audits. But if you're going to be having multiple people, I'd recommend you use that standardized method. And if you do use that standardized method, the person completing the audit will then just automatically get a rating at the end. They don't choose it themselves. So if you want to use that second method, I can take you through how to set that up on the next session. We can set one up as an example, and then we can kind of replicate that out across all of your other audits as well. But if you are practicing on the audits in the system, most of them at the moment are set to the rating drop-down option. So you will just need to select the rating like that. So I'll just say good for this one. And then the last tab on the end here is the View Report tab. So this will just give you a PDF copy of the audit report. So you've got your kind of summary page at the top. It'll then take you through each question. You can see how you've responded and what evidence you've provided. And then at the bottom, you'll just get your action plan area. So it'll just give you a summary of any actions that have been created off the back of the audit. And you have got a download and print button up here as well. So if you do want to store this externally off the system, you can do using either of those. And then right at the bottom of the View Report tab is where you can actually submit the audit on the system. So if it's greyed out, it just means that you've missed some mandatory information. So in my case, I haven't actually completed all of the questions, so I can't submit the audit. But if that is in blue, when you're ready to submit it, hit the submit button, and it'll then move that audit into the completed area within the audit planning screen. Anybody got any questions on completing an audit?
No, seems simple enough.
No, everybody happy with that and how that works?
Yep.
Yeah, brilliant. So just below audit planning, you've also got your external audit report area. And as I mentioned last time, this is where you can come to log any audits that have been completed by somebody external to the business. So it can be anything from health and safety report, an asbestos audit, fire safety report, anything really that's been completed by somebody other than yourselves. So when you click on the tab, it'll just take you to your external audit report dashboard. So in here, you'll just be able to see an overview of any reports that have been added on. You've got your view edit button down the right hand side as well, if you want to open any of those up. And if you want to create a new external audit report, come to create new, select the home that you want to create the report against. So I'll just do it for Brighton. And then it's just a case of going through and filling out the different fields of information on this form. So it's a fairly self-explanatory form. At the top here, you just need to initially select who the auditor actually is. And you can configure this list of auditors. So you'll probably want to take out things like CQC, as it won't be applicable. So if you do want to make changes to this list of auditors, within your system, if you come to admin at the top, within your audit section, we've got configure external auditors. In here, you can see the list that we can see in the drop down. So you've got your edit button if you want to rename any of them, delete icon if you want to remove any. And if you want to add additional auditors, click add new. Each one just needs a name and a description. Click save and it will add it to the table for you. But it's just a case of selecting the auditor initially, adding in some kind of basic name and date information. You've then got a comments and items discussed area. Again, if you do add anything into those areas, just make sure you hit the save button underneath. You've got a manage attachments area down at the bottom. So if there are any files that you want to attach to the audit, it could be that you just want to upload an actual copy of the audit report. Go to upload an attachment, and again, you can attach multiple files within here. And in the top right hand corner, you've also got add action functionality. So handy if the auditor gives you specific areas or things that you need to improve on, for example, we would always recommend that you create actions off the back of those, just to evidence that you are taking on board those improvements. So if you click that action button, again, it'll just take you to the normal action form, and you would go through and configure your action in exactly the same way that I took you through before. Anybody got any questions on this area? Brilliant. So if we just minimize our audit section and come into our action plan area. As I mentioned last time, the action plan area is where you'll just be able to see an overview of any audits that have been added onto the compliance system. So it doesn't matter where the action is created within the system. So whether you create it off the back of an audit, an external audit report, a complaint, an investigation, for example, regardless of where it's created, all of the actions will always pull through to this action plan area. And you can use these column headers that you can see at the top to change the way that the actions are sorted in the table. If I were to click on deadline, it would then sort the actions via deadline date in ascending order initially. Or if I click on deadline again, it then sorts them in descending order by deadline. And now that I've sorted my actions via deadline date, at the top just here, you can see that the action that we created earlier off the back of our non-compliant audit response is now appearing at the top. And if we want to have a look at that action, we just need to click onto it within the table. It takes us into the action and we can have a look at the information in here. So once the action has actually been added onto the system, it does look slightly different to the initial action form. And when the action owner receives that email and they click on the link, it'll take them into the system, and this is what they will be able to see. So they'll be able to see the action title. If the action has been created off the back of a specific audit, that audit will be listed for them. And if they also click on the audit icon just here, the system will take them into that audit. So quite handy if somebody just wants a bit of background or context just to see where that action was actually created from. And below that, if the action was created in relation to a specific audit question, that question will also be listed as well. So here we can see that question 2 around risk assessments and care plans being updated is also listed for us. Below that, you've got your short description area. So as I said before, the action owner should hopefully read the short description and they would understand exactly what it is that they need to do with regards to the action. And then the additional area that you get on the action, once it's been added onto the system, is this comments or updates area. So as the action owner does things on the action, they can come in and they can add an update onto that just here. And if I just add a test comment into here and click add comment, that's just how any sort of updates will be visible on the action. So you can see the user that made the comment, when it was made, and what the comment is. If I were to then add a second comment, it just appears directly underneath. But again, there's no character limit on the comments box, so the comment can be as long as the action owner needs it to be. And once they're happy that they've added on all of their updates and the action has been completed, they would scroll down to the bottom of the form. And where we've got action status, they would change that to completed. If they then click update action, it'll update the action for us. And if we come back to the action plan table, at the top where I've got my action, If we come across, you can see that the status is now showing as completed instead of in progress. And as the responsible employee, Callum would then come into this area, he would see that the action had now been completed, and he would look to validate the action. So in the same way, he would click onto the action, he would scroll through and just review the information. So we'd have a look at all the action comments that Debbie had added on. If he was then happy that the action could be validated, he would scroll down to the bottom and he would amend the status to validated. One thing to note is that you can decide which roles and users within the system do have the validate option. So it's not a case that all users on the system will have validation rights. As I say, you can decide which users have that validate option, and only those people that you give the validate option to will have the validated option in this dropdown. And if you select validated, you then just get two optional comments areas. So you can either enter a comment saying why the action is being validated and/or enter the action outcome, but they're not mandatory, so you don't have to add those in if you don't want to. And now if we click update action, that should update the status to validated. And if we come back into our action plan table, you can see that our action has now disappeared from the table. And the reason that it disappears once it's been validated is because by default, the action plan area is set to only show you actions that are outstanding and basically still need to be completed. Once they're validated, they're done basically, so they'll just automatically remove themselves from the table. If, however, you do want to view those validated actions, if you come to show filter in the top right hand corner, at the top here you have got a status drop down. And if you were to tick validated, you would then get your validated actions in the table below. But by default, I'd just recommend that you have that unticked. So as I say, you're only really seeing actions that are still outstanding and still need to be completed in here. As well as your status filter, you can also filter by your different homes. So I know you've just got one at the moment, but if you were to expand, you could filter by your different homes within here. And all of these drop downs here are just in relation to the different fields that you've got on the action form. So this should hopefully make a bit more sense now that we've created an action on the system, but you can filter by your different responsible employees, action owners, priority level, your different categories, all sorts of things. Once you're happy with your selection, hit hide filter and you'll get your updated action plan table below. You've also got this add new button right at the top just here. So if there is a very general action that isn't related to anything specific on the compliance system that you want to set up, you can just click the add new button. It'll take you into the same action form. And it's just then a case of, again, going through and filling out these fields in exactly the same way as before. So you don't just have to use the system for your compliance related actions. That add new function does allow you to manage all of your kind of wider general business actions as well. And the last button that you've got here is the send update request button. This is handy if you want to prompt people that they've got actions on the system that still need to be completed. And if I was going to use that, I would probably look to sort my actions via deadline date order. And it may be that I spot that I've got a couple of actions at the top with a deadline date of a couple of days' time, and the status is still showing as in progress. So I may just want to nudge those action owners to let them know that they've still got an outstanding action on the system that they need to come in and complete. So if I want to use that button, I basically need to go down and flag the actions that I want to send that update request for. And once you flag an action, it just changes to red. So I could flag the top two. And if I were to then click send update request, it would send those action owners a reminder email letting them know that they've still got outstanding actions on the system that they still need to come in and complete. Once you've pressed that button, I'd always recommend you just unflag the actions. If you leave them flagged and another user were to come in and press that against a different set of actions, if your actions are still flagged, your action owners are just going to receive another reminder email. So once you've pressed that, just make sure that you unflag those. And just to the right of that, you've got your 2 reporting buttons. So if you want to print the action plan area off as a PDF report, you can do. And the one to the right of that will just give you a big Excel spreadsheet with all the action information on. That's quite handy if you then want to just analyze or manipulate the information further. Anybody got any questions on actions?
No.
No, everybody happy with that? Yep, brilliant. And the last area I just want to take you through today is the complaints and compliments area. So as I mentioned on the last session, the process for adding a complaint and compliment onto the system is pretty much identical, apart from the fact that on the complaint form, you'll get 4 additional questions at the bottom of the form that just relate to whether the complaint needs to be escalated further. With a compliment, you would never need to investigate it or notify your regulator, for example. So the compliment form is very similar. It's just a bit more straightforward as you don't have those additional questions at the bottom. What we'll do is we'll add an example complaint on. We'll open an investigation so I can show you how you can log your investigation process. And then once we've done that, I'll show you the compliment form afterwards, just so you can see the key differences. So to add a complaint on, if you just open up the complaint board and come to add new complaint, you then just need to select the home that you want to create the complaint for. So we'll just do it for Brighton. And it then just takes us to the complaint form, which is just here. And you'll notice that at the moment, the only mandatory field on the form is the person who has complained. But as part of your system configuration, you can decide which of these fields you want to make mandatory. So it may be that you want to make the date mandatory, details of complaint, so people have to provide information. So you can decide which of these fields you want to make mandatory, and I'll show you where to do that on the next session. If we just start off at the top, the first field that we've got on the form here is just the person who has actually made the complaint. And if we open up the drop down, we've got various different options in here. And if you select service user or employee, the name of the person field just changes to a drop down, and I'll get either my list of service users or my list of employees that have been set up on the system. If, however, I choose any of the other options, so if I chose friend, the name of the person field just changes to a text box, and you've just got to manually type the person's name in. So we'll just say that a service user has complained, and we'll say that it's Bruce Williams. You've then got a contact details area, so if they've given you a phone number or an email address, you can log that to the right-hand side. You then just need to add in the date that the complaint has been received. So just come to your calendar icon. We'll say it's received today. If any service users have been involved in the complaint, you can then attach those service users to the complaint form just by opening up the drop-down and selecting any service users from the list. So you can either select one person or you can select multiple. And obviously, if no service users have been involved, you can just leave it blank. You then need to select the employee member who's actually received the complaint. Again, you'll just get a list of users within the drop-down. We'll say that Debbie received the complaint. You've got how was this complaint received? So in here, you've got the options of email, verbal, written, or other. And if you do select other, you'll get an additional text box where you can state the other detail. We'll say it was received verbally. And you then just need to select the person that's actually been assigned to handle the complaint. So I'm just going to say that Callum is handling it as he is Debbie's manager. You've then got your details of complaint area. So just a text box for you to log all the information around the complaint. Again, there's no sort of character limit in here, so you can provide as much information as you need to. You've then got actions already taken following the complaint. So if anything's been done so far, type it into the text box. If nothing has been done, I always just recommend popping NA in there so it's clear. You've then got nature of complaint. So in here, you've got various different options. If the nature isn't listed, again, you can select other and you'll get an additional box where you can add in the other detail. We'll select attitude of staff. You've then got format of acknowledgement, so the same options of email, verbal, written or other. We'll say that it's been verbally acknowledged, and we then just need to assign a level of severity to the complaint. And we'll just say medium for this example. It'll then just ask you whether duty of candour applies to the complaint. And if you do select yes to that question, it'll give you this pop-up to say, contact your operational director and inform them that duty of candour applies. So that's just a prompt to the person filling in the complaint form. Once they've read that, they can just select close. You've then got your document management area below that. So if there are any files that you want to attach to the complaint, select the document type, browse for the file, and then just hit the save button. So if somebody's complained via email or letter, for example, that would be a typical example of what you might look to attach in here. And then at the bottom, you've got your 4 additional questions. So as I mentioned before, on a compliment, it would finish at the document management area. You wouldn't have these additional questions, but with regards to a complaint, you've just got to go through and select yes or no to each of these questions. So you've got, does the complaint relate to a known incident? We could say yes. Is an investigation to take place? We'll say yes so I can show you what happens. Has the complainant stated that they do not want a response? So that question is a bit back to front. If you say no to that question, you're basically saying that the complainant does want a response, and you'll get this add new action prompt. And if you click that add new action prompt, it'll take you into the action form, and you typically go through and set up an action to contact the complainant with a response about the complaint. If you say yes to that, though, you're saying that they don't want a response, and that add new action prompt will then just disappear. And the last question is just whether it's notifiable to your regulator. So you've got a not applicable response on the end here as well, and we'll just say yes. And then provided you've filled out all of the mandatory information, you'll be able to submit the form at the bottom just here. So if we submit our complaint form and we scroll up to the top, you'll see that I've now got an investigation tab. And I've got an investigation tab because I said, yes, an investigation is to take place. If I'd answered no, I wouldn't have that investigation tab. But because we've said an investigation is required, I can come into my investigation tab. And once I hit under investigation, it opens the investigation for me. And I just need to go through and fill out the information on this investigation form. At any point, if the investigation needs to close, just hit the close investigation button at the top. But the first field we've got on here is just the investigation status. And in here, we've got awaiting statements or being investigated by external. So if it's being investigated internally, you would just need to select awaiting statements. If it, however, had been referred to somebody like the police, for example, that's where you'd select being investigated by external. If we just say awaiting statements, below that, you then just need to confirm who is responsible for actually leading the investigation. So this can either be an internal user, an external investigator, or it can be both. And if somebody internal is leading the investigation, the first thing you need to do is just select that person's role within the system. So I've currently got 3 roles on my training system. On your system at the moment, we've just got 1 role of system admin. But on the next session, I'll take you through role configuration. And if you do want your users to have different levels of access, we can configure those additional roles and they'll then appear in this list for you. I'm just going to say that my leader is an administrator. And then in the drop down below, I then get my list of administrator users on the system. I'll just say that Callum is going to be leading the investigation. And if somebody external was leading the investigation, it's just a case of ticking the external investigator and then entering their name and contact information to the right-hand side. Below that, you've got who is conducting the investigation. So this can be the same person or it can be somebody different. And again, you can have both internal and external investigators conducting their own sort of separate investigations. If it's somebody internal, it's exactly the same process. You just need to confirm that person's role first of all. So we'll say that they're an administrator. And again, I'm going to say that this time Alec is going to be conducting the investigation. And in the same way, if it's somebody external as well, tick who the investigator is and provide their name and contact information to the right. Whether witness statements are required. So the majority of the time, it'll probably be yes. But if they're not, you can tick no. If witness statements are required, to the right-hand side, it will just ask you how many witnesses are required. And depending on the number that you add in, so if I do 2, you'll get a contact details area for each witness. And it's just a case of adding in the date that either the statement was taken on or is due to be taken on. If I change that to 3, I then get a third contact details area. So you can have as many witnesses on the investigation form as you need to. And then at the bottom, you've got your investigation updates area. So you can come onto the investigation and add on any updates as often as you need to. It's just a case of typing the update into the comments box. And any updates that are added on will just appear on this complaint timeline at the bottom. So it just acts as a bit of an audit trail so you can see who's been doing what with regards to the complaint in the investigation. And you have got a download option as well. So if you need to store it externally or provide it to somebody, you can do so with that. And then on the left-hand side, you've got your document management area. So again, if you've got any files that you want to attach to the investigation, things like witness statements, for example, just upload those with that button. And lastly, you've got your add action button. So again, if there are any actions that you want to create in relation to the investigation, click that button and you would just go through and configure the action in the same way. And obviously, once the investigation has been completed, you would just click the close investigation button at the top and that'll just close the investigation for you. Below that, you've got your additional comments area. So if there's anything additional that hasn't been covered on either the complaint or investigation form, add those into here and just click Save Comment. You've got a download PDF button that will just give you a PDF copy of the complaint and investigation information. And if I just show you the compliment form so you can see the key difference. So it's exactly the same process. Compliment board, add new compliment. Again, select the home. And then you'll see that the format of the form is the same. It just says compliment instead of complaint. So you would go through and fill out the information in exactly the same way. And then it just finishes at the document management area. So with a compliment, you don't need to worry about those additional questions at the bottom. So adding a compliment on should be a little bit more straightforward. Both areas do have a dashboard. So if you do want to see an overview of any complaints or compliments that you've added on, open up the board and just come to view below your add new button. And the dashboard is very similar to the action plan area. You can use the column headers at the top to change the way that the complaints are sorted. Hover and click to open if you want to have a look at the complaint that's been submitted. And you've got a home filter, date of complaint filter, and level of severity filter. And then right at the end, you've got a status filter, which is quite handy if you only want to see complaints that are at a certain stage of the investigation, for example. Anybody got any questions about the complaint or compliment process?
No.
Nope.
No.
No, perfect. And that's everything that we need to cover today. So I don't know if anybody's got anything additional that they want to ask or go through. Is everybody happy with everything?
Yeah, seems
Okay.
straightforward.
Yeah, perfect. So if after today anybody wants to have a practice at what we've been through, you've got your 4 audits in here. We can wipe the system for you before you start using it properly. So don't feel like you have to provide kind of proper evidence in here. You can just provide dummy information and we can then get rid of the audit for you, as I say, before you start using the system properly. So if you want to have a go at completing an audit, maybe creating an example action and kind of following that through the full process all the way up to validating it, that would kind of be what I'd recommend doing after today. If nobody's got any further questions, I'll just confirm with you when our next session is. So we've got that one on Monday, actually. So Monday at 1 o'clock. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, perfect. So I'll send you the user guide from today. The recording as well, I'll share with everybody so that those who aren't on the session can watch it back. And I'll send across the invite for Monday as well.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks for your time, everybody. Have a good
Thank you.
weekend, and I'll speak to you all on Monday.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.